Hi, and welcome to another episode of Health Naturally. My name is Paul Gerst, a licensed acupuncturist and owner of the Balanced Path Wellness Center in Medway. I'm here today with my guest, Steve Dubois, Indoor Environmental Air Specialty Oh boy, I hose that.
Indoor Air Quality Specialist, Paul.
All right, let's say it again.
Indoor Air Quality Specialist.
See, that's the thing, I've never heard
3 times
that
fast?
before. Yeah, right? And
That's something I made up.
And the business is Green
Home Solutions.
All right. Well, tell you what. Let's start off by hearing a little bit about you first, and then we'll jump into what you do.
Sure. As long as I could remember, I always wanted to be a mold guy, indoor air quality specialist, which is completely not true. Nobody ever grows up wanting to go into the field that I am in. Actually, general business background, a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration, and I was just looking for an interesting business to pursue, and it is a franchise, came across my desk, and I was just blown away by the amount of help that I could give people in a day-to-day life. It really is a feel-good business. And then from there, I took my certifications and my training and learned the skill, and over the years have gone through the continuous education to learn what indoor air quality really is.
Well, just letting everybody know, as Steve and I have talked before, he's part of the networking group that I have, the Health Sphere networking group that I have of people working together to try to help people in the area. And in sitting down with Steve, one of the things that, the reason I was fascinated by what you do is because there's obviously I work in the natural medicine side, and you handling things from the kind of the I don't want to say non-chemical, but the, what's a better way of putting that?
Well, we do things in a different way, and most of what I do is mold remediation and mold inspections, and typically companies approach that from a trades perspective. They're going to come in, they're going to evaluate the situation, they're going to do the demolition, the reconstruction. We come in from a natural health perspective. We really want to make sure that when we write our protocols and do our inspections, that we are helping the people in their home or office. So it's not always the the obvious tear out this wall. We try to approach things from a natural method.
Yeah, and that's why I was attracted to that. As I told you when we were sitting down talking, that in Chinese medicine we learn about one of the causes of disease being in our environment. And it's something that's so often overlooked, in my opinion, that I feel like a huge part of and I have done this in certain areas that I've practiced in. I have not entered into this aspect of the practice here in Medway, but when I used to go into people's homes, and I'd look under the sink. I would look, if I'm treating them for allergies and things like that, and I feel like we're not plugging the holes kind of thing. That's a huge part of it, and that's why I wanted to pull you into the fray. Can you tell people a little bit about what, so you said the number one thing you work with is mold remediation?
Sure, so I'm doing a whole indoor air quality assessment when somebody calls me into their home. But oftentimes, other than the obvious, maybe it's dust and dust mites, candles and other pollutants that people put into the air, it oftentimes is mold. And how we find it is, with the senses, the visual, the smell and all that. But typically, more often than not, we actually like to take air quality samples. And what happens with that is we have a calibrated pump that we set up into somebody's home. It takes about 5 minutes a sample. It takes in a calibrated amount of air, and it deposits any sediment it brings into what's called a cassette. And it's just a little circular disc. And in the middle of that cassette is a slide. And so when we're done, we close up the cassette, we ship it to a lab. They put the slide under a microscope and see what's there. And what we do is we actually do a sample inside the home, or many samples inside the home, whatever we're looking at, and we do a sample outside the home, which is the control sample. So we are looking to see what's going on inside the home that's not natural.
Relative to outside the home, sure.
Yeah, if you have a whole bunch of Penicillium aspergillus outside the home and it's equal inside, nothing really you can do about it. You just open up a window and it's going to equalize. But if you have a particular type of mold or allergen in the home that does not show itself in the outside sample, then that gives us a clue as to what are we looking for? Why is this mold growing here? And then from there we can do our investigation and narrow it down and provide a protocol to fix the problem.
How long does it take to, like from the time you come in to do an assessment of somebody's environment to the point where you say, here's your house back here, good, you're good to go?
Yeah, usually our initial assessments are about an hour. If we are doing air quality sampling, then we typically get the results the next business day. And then from there, we can write our protocol. And if the schedules work, we could typically have your house, back up and running in a day. It's not the old way of mold remediation where you gotta, move out for a week and stay in a hotel. Typically, most problems we can solve within the day, and you can come home back after dinner.
What are other things that aside from mold remediation, what are other things you get into?
Yeah, allergens, bacteria, dust mites, soot and other pollutants.
Okay. Anything that would surprise people?
Well, the number one air pollutant in a home actually is lighting candles inside the home. Yeah, it's a big surprise. I'm not telling you not to light candles. They're great, when you have guests over, hospitality, really is good etiquette to light a candle. But, with modern construction, these homes are being built a lot tighter than they used to be built. Okay. So you just have to think about anything you produce in the air is going to linger in that home. A candle's producing obvious soot. If there's a fragrance, well, what's that fragrance coming from? All other different chemicals and things in that chemical that you are putting into that air.
Well, and there's soy-based candles versus the paraffin-based. There's all sorts of different things to consider, of course. How about the Glade plugins and to your point, anything that you put into a home that doesn't have that good indoor or outdoor, but is there anything that you have concerns about from the business side of things? Is there anything that you tell people, I wouldn't use that if I were you, or I wouldn't do that in your house if I were you?
I tell people to stay away from anything chemical.
Okay.
So if you're going to get a candle, get a good quality, beeswax candle, something that burns a little cleaner. Stay away from different fragrances like the Glade plugins or the Febreze. I actually had it. I don't know if I want to talk bad about Febreze, but I actually had a customer that thought she had MS, and we went in the home, and I just went in, and there was this overwhelming scent, and as she was showing me every room, she would first spray it with Febreze. Yeah. And in researching, some of the active ingredients in Febreze, something was causing her body to react in that way, and she cut out the Febreze and she instantly got better.
Do you know one of the professions that has the biggest problem with this, speaking to environmental issues, salons? So the hairdressers, the nail salon, the ones that combine the hair and the nails and the whole works. Sure. And if they're not natural with their issues, you walk in there and people with migraines, it's a trigger for them.
You get that smell and you can feel the brain cells dying.
Yeah, I've had many of them as patients, and of course you can imagine the challenge there. But so back to people's homes, what would be beyond that? You were talking about insulation being a concern. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, sure. So, just again, to be mindful of, we are building homes tighter to be more energy efficient. So we need to be worried about what's being kicked up in the air. One of the biggest trends going on right now is the blown-in cellulose insulation. This is made of recycled newspaper and things like that, which not really anybody's going to be allergic to, but they are shredded very finely. And if there's something that's causing a negative pressure in your home, you can actually pull those particles from the attic or the wall inside the home. Okay. So sometimes there's a pressure problem that can be drawing these dust particles, and it's just a constant irritant as you're breathing. Your ductwork is another place in your home that you've probably never dusted. And if you look in your ductwork, and not just the 2 feet that you can see, but all the way, you may be surprised as to how much dust and dust mites and allergens are lurking in the ductwork. Wow. Every time you kick on the heat or the air conditioning, you are going to be putting a certain amount of that dust back into the home and recycled.
What kind? So, in considering a whole house, top to bottom, is there you just brought up something with the ductwork that was that's suggesting that kind of hidden area. Are there any other areas that people, is there anything that people can do on their own? I get like I can't get 10 feet into my ducts and do this kind of thing, but what can people do at home to, like what areas should they consider?
Yeah, well, the ductwork is something that should be professionally cleaned every 5 years or so. But in the meantime, changing out your filters, putting in a shop vac to suck out what you can reach is certainly going to be very helpful. Also, there's a stack effect to the home. Typically, if you can control the environment in the basement, then that's going to eventually make its way up. So if you can control it down there, there's going to be less problems that are going to rise up. So look, a dehumidifier in the basement, making sure it's clean. If you get a leak, that it's picked up quickly. Anything organic that gets wet is either dried very, very quickly, and I'm talking about as little as 24 hours, mold and bacteria will start to grow, or you throw it away. So don't store things in cardboard in your basement. Have a dehumidifier, manage moisture, and keep a clean home.
Okay. One of the things, forgive my ignorance here about, because I wasn't raised out here, but some of the basements out here, as one that I know you've looked at, what do you call that? Like when the water, like the way the old homes and water gets in more readily, and so what is it? How are they fixing that again? What you brought up a word to me at one point where they have to. So you bring in...
Typically it's done by a French drainage system. Okay. So you either want to stop the water from coming into the home or let it into the home but have a way to get rid of it, or probably both. To dig what a French drain is it's just a trench that is dug along the foundation, and you fill it with crushed stone so the water will immediately drain down and then out through a perforated pipe. And then if it does come into the home, you could have another French drain actually in the basement along the foundation, where the water is then channeled to a sump pump and then pumped out.
Yeah, this had to do with repairing the wall. Something to, with the stone, because of the stone walls and that where I'm from, that just doesn't, we don't see that, something that I wasn't familiar with when
well, I'm not sure where you're getting at, but there are some, crawl spaces with dirt floors that we run into in New England, a lot of old home, particularly on the Cape. And when you have a dirt floor, crawl space, or basement, there's just even more for a reason for not only moisture and water to actually come up, but soil gases and other things that can cause people some harm over time. Radon is one example. There's a whole host of other gases that can come into the home from the ground that can cause people trouble.
What are people typically calling you, like with what health problems are you, we were talking about allergies, but what other health problems are people calling, saying, hey, I got to get you in here to check my place out?
Yeah, honestly, it's the whole gambit. A lot of times it's, every time I walk into this room, my eye starts twitching, or I get a headache, or I feel it in my chest, or...
So respiratory conditions, neurological conditions, any kind of chronic health issues, people are checking in with you?
It's an allergic reaction most of the time. There are some molds and some things that are toxic, and that will build up in your system over the time, and you'll have a toxicity to it. But most of the time, it's an allergenic reaction. So your body is trying to fight that whatever allergen in some way, and it's causing some funky symptom. So anything that would be a allergy, a rash, runny nose, headaches, all of those things that we see, in other allergens in our lives could be attributed to mold.
All right.
And dust.
Any other wisdom you'd like to impart on our audience before we say goodbye?
Oh boy. Well, yeah, you asked me briefly, what can people do in their homes to prevent a call for somebody like me. And I do actually want to get into a couple different types of remediation methods
Sure.
before we go too.
Yeah.
But a final tip, it's all about controlling moisture in your home. So there are three things that mold and bacteria, primarily need to grow. And that's organic matter, it's heat, and it's water.
Okay.
And in a home, look, we're going to have organic matter. That's your wood, that's your drywall, that's your fabric, everything. And you're going to have heat because you have to live there.
Yeah.
But the only thing that we can control is moisture, and that includes humidity. So dehumidifier in the basement, if something gets wet, it's dried out very, very quickly or thrown away. Mm-hmm. And just making sure you're on the lookout for moisture will solve a lot of your problems in the future.
How about clutter? Just out of curiosity, just like when you go out, some people's houses, you see them store so much,
Sure.
and is that an issue? Collecting dust, that kind of thing, and
Well, yeah. Certainly, the cleanliness of your home, the dust. People aren't usually allergic to dust, but they're allergic to the dust mites that will feed off of the dust. So cleaning your home will remove that irritant as well. And just making sure you have a properly cleaned room will help you clean the dust better.
Sure.
Also, the cardboard and some other organic materials can really suck in the moisture like a sponge and facilitate the growth of all sorts of
good point.
irritants.
There's our organic matter.
Yeah.
So what are these? So you were talking to discuss different forms of remediation. What do we got? What do you got for us?
Yeah, sure. So there's really two methods of remediation for mold and bacteria right now. And there's the chemical-based treatments, and then there's the enzyme treatments. And there's a couple differences. When people see mold growing in their bathroom, one of the common things is, well, I'll just wipe it with bleach, right?
Sure.
You hear that all the time. Well, the truth is, bleach is really only a couple percent bleach, and it's about 98% water. So that 2% of active ingredient will kill a little bit of that surface mold. It will do a really good job removing the look of the mold and the stain. But once that molecule of bleach hits a molecule of mold, there's a little explosion, and now that active ingredient is now inert. So it's not going to work anymore. And what's worse is you are now saturating that porous material, the drywall, the plaster, with excess moisture, which can actually feed the roots. So wiping something with bleach is kind of like mowing the grass. You're making it look good, you're helping it, certainly, but now the roots can actually grow a little stronger. The other problem is that a chemical what it does is it pops the cell wall of the mold cell. And effectively kills it, but it's actually the protein in the nucleus of the mold cell that we have the allergic reaction to.
Okay.
And a chemical does nothing to that protein in the nucleus. So typically, if you're going to remediate mold in a bathroom with a bleach or a chemical solution, you then want to cut out that area and replace it with something new. One of the things that we found in our business is many times we can use an enzyme product instead of a chemical product, which has many benefits. One, it is natural. There's no lingering smells. And two, it actually eats the protein of the allergen, of the mold cell, which is the allergen.
So it would go into the surface that you're talking about versus the bleach that takes care of the outside. The enzyme gets into the surface?
Yes. It is recycled, unlike a chemical, in that it doesn't use its energy in a reaction. So it actually does have the staying power to be absorbed in the porous material and kind of keep working like Pac-Man right through it. Yeah. But it also will actually eat not only the cell wall, but the nucleus of the mold cell, which is the allergen. So oftentimes, if we use an enzyme approach rather than a chemical approach, we then don't have to do the traditional demo that a chemical solution would need.
Well, that would be attractive to people, I'm sure, on a number of levels, but mainly financial, I would think, so they don't have to destroy certain things in their house. But
it's typically cheaper. It's quite a bit more effective,
and healthier.
And healthier.
Yeah, right. And that's kind of the
we're not solving a problem by causing another.
Okay. So, and are there from the natural end of things, there's not a cornering of the market for obviously for natural products.
Sure.
It's like people, is it a matter of people, like what I know when I go into a store and I'm looking at the shelf and I'm thinking, well, it's a little harsh, and well, yeah, I'll give the cleaning example because then I don't have to talk about any products or this kind of thing like I'm sporty. But I literally have a bottle of vinegar,
Yes.
white vinegar, and a bottle of peroxide.
Yes.
And that is after reading a study that said, geez, you spray these two things, let them sit there for 30 seconds, wipe them up.
Yes.
It's equal to any cleaner with the harshest chemical that
Great
you'll get.
point.
Yeah. Right?
So in my business, when we do have to use a chemical solution, instead of using a bleach, we will use hydrogen peroxide or white vinegar. We actually find that it removes the stain just as well. And if it's a vinegar, it has a vinegary smell, which is a lot more pleasant than a pool. And hydrogen peroxide just evaporates into oxygen, so it's perfect.
Yeah. So like if we're like when you're going through and you're doing something beyond, well, let's put it this way. You assess somebody's environment, you go through and you use the products that you use. Are there things that you recommend that are outside, hey, if you go to such and such a store, get this instead of this? I mean, are you educating your clients about that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. As far as, a mold or a bacteria problem, when it's solved, it's solved. So long as you keep the water under control.
Okay.
I'll often recommend a dehumidifier. You don't need anything fancy, but I do want it to be self-pumping, and I do want it to have a humidistat. So it'll kick on when the humidity gets too high, it'll shut off when it doesn't, and you don't have to remember to dump the bucket. So I do want it to be self-pumping. You can pump it to a drain or outside the home. And I often tell people to, if they're lighting a lot of candles, to lose the candles and switch to a essential oil diffuser.
Okay. Steve, thank you very much for being here. And I'm going to have, because I butchered it in the beginning of the show, I'm not going to do it at the end of the show. Say what you are again, an indoor?
I'm an indoor air quality specialist.
Thank you very much. From Green Home Solutions, Steve Dubois. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Paul Gerst. This has been another episode of Health Naturally.